Real, true education, not fake news. It's the 19th of October 2020 and this is an important video. I have some great news to announce. I hope you stick with it. I may have to make two. The name of the video is SEA Vindicated 13D. It's video 13D. And it follows on earlier ones on developments and about environmental law. Now don't switch off, because this is, I'll be putting this in a very simple context. So the first thing to remember is that when the EU was proposed, there was a treaty on the functioning of the European Union, and it had in it two concepts: subsidiarity, where Ireland and other countries gave their authority to the EU to make decisions overruling Irish decisions, and the Irish Constitution allows the EU to make rulings and decisions and court cases and laws outside of the Irish Constitution. You'll understand that. Now that's subsidiarity, but in order to justify that, and I read every single piece of them at the time, in order to justify that, it was decided that there'd be the proportionality principle. There has to be proportionality. There has to be an assessment of everything done. Everything has to be carefully thought out and done only where it's justified, right? And of course we have a crazy National Renewable Energy Action Plan of 2010, and we have the wind energy guidelines of 2006. And most of you will know, and if you don't, that I'm a strong opponent of wind energy from the word go. I had a wind turbine here years ago, and I studied the subject real well, and I and plenty of others all agree it's a complete and utter scam. And we have one built here beside me, and the noise of it is something else, and there's only a few of them running at a time, and they cannot get a customer for it because they're all built too close together. So the talk of any engineering assessment other than groundwater and things like that is out. Our planning authorities have no knowledge of it, don't have a clue what they're talking about, and they will overrule you if you object on that grounds. So what the situation is, that there's a development, that's just building a house or maybe a garage for your car or something. There's a project which is something like a wind farm, or it could be a quarry, something which is business oriented, not a private thing. And then there's a public planner program, which is the overarching thing. Now I'm trying to make this simple. Look, there's a development which is the ordinary house or whatever you're trying to do, maybe a shop or something, and there's a project which is like putting in something like, as I said, a quarry, or it might be something for a fuel line or something which is listed and needs a special EIA, special environmental impact assessment at local level. And then there's there's the EIA, that's the environmental impact assessment. There's the Habitats Directive. There's a pollution control directive. And you might ask yourself, what is wrong with that? What's the problem with that? And the problem is that there's no overarching assessment. See that there? So typical is the National Renewable Energy Action Plan. That gives authority for doing all these projects like wind farms, like the North-South Interconnector. There could be other ones for river management. There could be other ones for maybe doing up ports, or what do you call them, jetties or harbours or whatever. If it's on a national level and there's money allocated and all that, then there should be an assessment done at country level, at the level of the country or the government of the country. If it's, some countries in Europe have sub-governments, they have individual governments, and Northern Ireland is a typical example in the UK and Scotland. So there should be an overarching one done. Now the trouble is that it was never done in the case of wind energy. And Pat Swords, a friend of mine, an engineer from Dublin, took a case to try to challenge the National Renewable Energy Action Plan, and it fizzled out. He didn't lose his cause, but they just kept, they just wouldn't entertain him. The courts didn't want to know, right? So we then tried another idea with the European Platform Against Wind Farms. We tried to get in, using a lawyer, into the European Court of Justice, and to challenge the Europe's National Renewable Energy Directive, the Directive on Renewable Energy, and it was ruled that you couldn't get in were all set to go. It was ruled that unless you were a business, or unless you were some major, like Guinness's brewery, or a big thing like airlines or something, you couldn't get in. The ordinary man couldn't get in. That's the exception. That's why the EU is not democratic in that respect. So we couldn't get in, so we had to forget about it. So the next thing was when the North-South Interconnector, or the pylons as we call them around here, they're running from, we'd say, Southmead up into County Tyrone. They're 104 kilometres long, and the cross boundaries and all the regulations and all the directives about crossing boundaries were all ignored. So they never did an SEA, a strategic environmental assessment on them, because they said in the documentation supporting it that they were using it to build 600 megawatts of wind energy in the northwest of the Republic and the northwest of Northern Ireland, and that justified it. And there's no assessment for onshore wind. So I took my case to the High Court. I made great bit of fun and got a lot of help from people, and I took it up with the aid of Pat Swords, and we tried to get it blocked, right? Tried to get it blocked. Now the number of that case was 217 104 JR, and here is the one of the vast array of documentation that was involved. There's some of the stuff on it there, and the affidavits, and they're all in there. Now you can't read them. That's just an example of about 1/8 of what was served on me, and trying to get out of it. And Airgrid's answer was simply that they're doing more of this and go to hell. That was their answer, and they said that in the court before Judge Max Barrett. We're going on with this. So the answer to the wrongdoing was we're going to do more of it. And Judge Max Barrett ruled in his judgment that he ruled that Bord Pleanála was only a clearinghouse and had no substantial decision to make. Now in that case it was a project of common interest from the EU, and that's not what the PCI directive says, and I would dispute that, but he wouldn't entertain it anyway, and he ruled that in the case of a PCI that Bord Pleanála had no substantial decision to make. Now in the case of North-South Interconnector, that was a PCI, so you get the idea, a project of common interest. Now the point is, why was there any planning process at all when Bord Pleanála had no option only granted according to him? And I hadn't the resources to appeal to the Supreme Court, and I lost my case, and many people say she lost. Well, I did lose, because the judge made that decision, and the judge was wrong. He erred. He got it wrong. But in the end of the day, we know very well he wasn't going to go against the government. So then we were looking at, now in the case of the North-South Interconnector, I tried to get North-East Pylon Pressure Group to go in to, they did take a judicial review. They developed some of the law, particularly on the right to win on land, but they didn't do what I wanted, was challenge it on the strategic environmental assessment. And eventually I was insisting on this, and I was getting fairly strong on it, and they put me out of their meetings. Now their chairman said I had good knowledge of the SEA directive. So that begs the question, why did North-East Pylon Pressure Group not challenge the North-South Interconnector on the SEA? And now it's granted in the north, and it applies in England, even locally in England, it's irrespective of Brexit, and I'm inclined to think they won't challenge it there either. And this is the 6-mark question I'd like answered. Why? Why? Okay. Now, you can check the SEA directive online, and the main point is for Article 2 and Article 3. Now, the idea of the SEA directive is that you have an overarching assessment, that you assess what use wind is, how much it's going to contribute, what the environmental impacts are, and you allow for judicial review and public participation. I'll give you a very good, simple example. Supposing that the government, the Irish government in the morning, was given funding to do up smaller ports like Clotterhead, Greenover, Ross's Point, I think is one. Please don't hold me. Rossaville, we'd say in Galway. Is there one in Dingle? Maybe. Waterford Port. Smaller ports, and they're going to do them up for shipping and all that sort of stuff, make them more accessible. And they include on the list of ones Lochsheelan, Kilnahard Pier in Lochsheelan, which is a pier, a jetty for launching fishing boats. Well, somebody in the locality would just write in on the public participation. There'd have to be a notice put up, and there'd be notice on the radio if they did it right. And somebody, on a notice in the local paper, somebody would write in and say, wait, Kildahard is a freshwater lake, it's not the sea. And immediately it would be taken off the list. It's an error. So the idea is that local participation helps to sort out errors. And I'm on 10 minutes. Now, anyway, a group known as Group A, I know all about them, in Belgium, in the Flanders area of Belgium, saw an application for 5 wind turbines in the community. Now, in about 2006, the government of that area, Flanders, the local government, brought out guidelines on renewable energy. And so they brought it out there. About that time, they brought out guidelines on wind energy. And the Irish government brought out the 2006 renewable energy guidelines, which allowed 5 126 metre high wind turbines to go all within 550 metres of where I am right here, right around my property, right around my house, and right around everything. And the shadow flicker, and the noise is terrible, and all that. So we'll just take a look here at. I'm going to pause this just to get the idea of it here. Now, what the guidelines said was, they said that the specific noise is determined in the vicinity of the nearest foreign dwelling or the nearest habitable zone in order to assess whether the wind turbine or wind farm in a specific place may be permitted or evaluated. An evaluation shall be made by derogation from Annex this, that and the other. We're not going to that, you're not interested in that. Now, the thing is, it says here the zones, and it gives evening decibels and day decibels, 49 and 44, and night 39. And then it gives other zones for industrial, now, zones or parts of zones situated less than 500 metres from individual zones shall not reference to the point 3 degrees or zones intended to collect utilities or public amenities. So it's all that sort of stuff. It's a schedule, and it gives inhabited zones, and it says what the noise level are. So down along the left here, you see the actual decibels, the noise that can be, and it defines the various type of business. Of business and dwellings and other things. So, for example, amusement zones, with the exception of recreation or holiday zones, it can be 54, it can be 49 and 44. So it's a guideline on noise, the very same as the National Urban Energy Action Plan guideline, as the 2006 wind energy guidelines in Ireland are, only it's a bit more specific. So they drew up this anyway, and of course it's totally inadequate, because I know here that 500 metres is no good. You'd want to be a kilometre away before you'd be saved, and there's terrible noise here. So that's what they've done. They made these guidelines, and there's a whole lot of other stuff there that I won't go into, and they made these guidelines. And when the planning permission was granted by the planning authorities in the Belgium area of Flanders, that must be the famous Flanders where all the battles were fought in the Second World War, when that happened, they took a judicial review to the court, and it was referred to the European Court of Justice for determination. And we got a fantastic result. And I've been trying for this for 12 years, and we couldn't get anyone to go in and challenge it on this, but the Belgian people did, and as a result we got the following 3 points in the judgment, and I'm going to read them to you now. So we're going to come to them here now, and the thing is, at the bottom of a judgment you get the black writing. You get the black writing there. Now the judgment is, to get it, you go into Court of Justice of the EU. It's the Grand Chamber, they call it here, right? The Grand Chamber. So the Court of Justice of the EU, and the number is, the case number is C24//19. C24//19. Because it was 1919 the judgment was delivered, and then it had to go through the Advocate General and all this. So only published last week. And on the top you have info curio case law. If you put in curia, C-U-R-I-A, curia, there often gets lex in it, but this is the report of the court itself. So you get this type of thing here. You see that there. up there. I hope you can see that. And that's what you're looking for to get the case. And you get in the other references online a bit shorter. But I'm going to do that for you now. So it gives you the whole routine exactly as what I'm happening. As I am telling you, sorry. And I'm going to read the judgment out now. It's 16, and there's only this will be short. This is just a ruling at the bottom. On those grounds, the Court Grand Chamber hereby rules. Article 2.3 of the Directive 201/42 EC, that's the SEA Directive, that's the one I've been preaching about for so long, of the European Parliament and of the Council of the 27th of June 2001 on the assessment of the effects of certain plans and programmes on the environment must be interpreted as meaning that the concept of plans and programmes covers an order or a circular adopted by the government of the federal entity of a member state, both of which contain various provisions concerning the installation and operation of wind turbines. And that means the guidelines of 2006, which were just done arbitrary without any public participation in Flanders, and the same guidelines in Ireland. I think it's 2006 in Belgium, it's definitely 2006 in Ireland. Those guidelines, and any guidelines they're trying to make now, must comply with the SEA Directive. Article 2.3 of that, I'll just read it again, on the effects of certain plans or programs on the environment, must be interpreted as meaning that the concept of plans and programs covers, right, an order or circular adopted by the government of a federal entity of a member state, both of which contain the various provisions concerning the installation and operation of wind turbines. Must have it. So you can't use the 2006 directives at all, or the 2006 guidelines, or any guideline on wind turbines, because they don't comply with the SEA Directive. The second part here, I'll just get a snap of that. Now, that's Article 2A. That starts off the thing in the directive, and you can check it yourself. Article 3.2a, this is my bugbear. This is the one that says an environmental assessment must be done for energy, forestry, fishery and agriculture. Article 3.2a of Directive 201/42 must be interpreted as meaning that an order and a circular, both of which contain various provisions concerning the installation and operation of wind turbines, including measures on shadow flicker, safety, noise levels, standards, constitute plans and programs that must be subject to an environmental assessment in accordance with the provision. Article 2a, that just says an environmental assessment must be done with public participation. And that's what I've been looking for, folks, for 12 years, and pulling my hair out to try and get groups to take this action, to try and get northeast pressure group to take this action, to try and get the northern pressure group to take this action. And it fell on deaf ears. It fell on deaf ears. And we could have stopped the pylons if we had to know, and had to be anyone prepared to take up my case and run with it and appeal. And they're going ahead now. So I've read the two parts of the judgment. 3. Where it appears that an environmental assessment within the meaning of Directive 201/42 should have been carried out prior to the adoption of the order or circular on the basis of which a consent. Now, when they were doing the 2006 guidelines here in Ireland and in Belgium, they should have did the SEA, the assessments, but they didn't. So this covers this situation where we now find ourselves in, that they haven't done it. So where that's the situation, which is contested before a national court. So in the planning process in Ireland, you have the local council planners, you have Bord Pleanála, and you have the High Court in Dublin. Okay, now which is contested before a national court, was granted for installation and operation of wind turbines, with the result that those instruments and that consent do not comply with EU law. That court may maintain the effects of those instruments and that consent, so it may leave it alone. So if they've granted it and it's challenged, or I challenge this one here, or which I probably will do, someone has said, a neighbour, you'll put those turbines out of there yet. And if God spares me, I definitely will. But where they have went ahead and done this without having the proper SEA carried out for their guidelines to make sure they're scientific and the distances are correct and everything is assessed properly from an engineering point of view. Now, and I said this to the department people, I met 5 of them in 2014, and I pointed this out to the Minister Rabbit and several others, and Minister Ryan. So where the consent or the permission was granted for the installation and operation of wind turbines, with the result that these instruments and that consent do not comply with EU law, that court may maintain the effects of those instruments, it can leave them there, and that consent only if the national law permits it to do so. If it permits it to do so. In the proceedings before it. Well, our law doesn't, sort of does, it's shy on that. It doesn't say what happens when they're built illegally. But if the national court says you can't do it, that's alright. But that doesn't really matter. So if it permits it to do so. In proceedings before it. And the annulment, in other words, cancelling the consent of that consent would be likely to have significant implications for the electricity supply of the whole of the member state concerned. Not a bit of it, the whole of the member state concerned. And only for a period of time strictly necessary to remedy that illegality. It is for the referring court, if necessary, to carry out the assessment in the case of the main proceedings. If the thing is built, or if it's granted permission to be built, and it's an electrical power station, a wind farm, whatever, and if stopping it right now would cause a blackout right away in the whole of the country, not in a part of it, in the whole of the Republic of Ireland, then the court can allow it to continue strictly only as long, strictly necessary to remedy the illegality. To remedy that illegality, if the referring court agrees. Now, if the referring court can do it. Now, here's what that means again, and I'm going to read it again. Oh, Jenny Mac, we're in 22 minutes. Where it appears that an environmental assessment within the meaning of the directive should have been carried out prior to the adoption of the order and circular, that's the 2006 guidelines, or whatever other guidelines are issued, a circular, on the basis of which consent which is contested before the National Court was granted for the installation and operation of wind turbines, with the result that those instruments and that consent do not comply with EU law. That court may maintain the effects of those instruments, it may leave the guidelines alone for now, and that consent only if the national law permits it to do so. Alright, we'll not go into that. In the proceedings before it. And if the annulment of that consent would be likely to have significant implications for the electricity supply of the whole of the member state concerned, and only for a period of time strictly necessary to remedy that illegality. It is for the referring court, if necessary, to carry out the assessment in the case of the main proceedings. So, what that means is, all of Ireland wind farms are built without proper authority. They have no planning permission at all. Why would any investor go and invest in a thing like that? They have no planning permission at all. If you challenge them on it, the Irish government would have to show that these wind farms are necessary to keep the lights on, and they're not necessary because we have no wind on a calm day and we still don't have blackouts. So all of Ireland wind farms are illegal. And the point you might ask about the interconnector, does this apply? Well, there aren't, strictly speaking, guidelines on interconnectors. So it's slightly different. However, what this court does is, it deals with what it has before it. The 2006 guidelines here and the guidelines in Belgium are illegal because there's no SEA done and the planning permission granted on for them is null and void. It even says to annul it, it's squashed. The second point is, this strengthens the hand for the interconnector. If it applies for wind turbines, then it applies for the interconnector. It has to be. You couldn't separate wind turbines. But this directive suits me because it deliberately pinpoints wind turbines. And it strengthens the hand of all those people who are suffering from it. And we'll have good crack with this. So folks, thank you very much. That's 24 minutes. Oh Lord, I hope you all look at this. This is such good news. This is such good news. I've been vindicated after 12 years. And I'm going to probably do another video some other time just to go into other pieces of it. But for time constraints now, don't forget, you'll get the judgment there by just going into C24/19 info curia case law, and you'll get it there online and you can look at it. And you only need to go to the black bit on the bottom, and it's really, really good news, folks. Really good news. I feel great over it. I feel vindicated over it. Judge Barrett got it wrong, and I was right to take my review. And it's a great pity this opportunity was wasted by so many who think they know everything about environmental law. It is unbelievable. And now that we're going to see the North-South Interconnector being built in contravention of a direct ruling by the European Court of Justice, the Grand Chamber, the highest part of it. It's just mind-boggling, folks. Folks, that'll do. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. My old heart is beating a bit prouder in my chest today. Thank God for this. It's a great development. We'll see you back and we'll talk about something else.